The orange sky of Titan hung low and heavy, clouds of methane drifting like slow ghosts across the horizon. The scrapyard stretched for miles, filled with broken ships, twisted metal, and the memories of old wars. It was silent except for the hum of the cold wind and the faint crackle of electricity from a nearby generator. Elias Vorn sat beside his small workshop. Wiping grease from his hands, he was an old human mechanic, the kind who could fix anything: ships, drones, even alien tech if he had the right tools. His face was hard, marked by years of work and war, but his eyes still carried a quiet kindness. He thought the day would pass like any other. Another job, another repair, another lonely evening. Then he heard it. A sound that didn't belong to this world. It was like a cry, but layered. Part animal, part machine, part something else entirely. He looked up toward the gate of his scrapyard, and what he saw made him freeze. Through the fog came a young alien girl. Her skin shimmered faintly with silver tones, her eyes glowing faint blue in the dark. She was small, weak, and carrying something massive behind her. It was a creature, a dragon, but unlike any Elias had ever seen. The dragon's scales were pure white, pale as ice, and each scale reflected the light like polished glass. But its body was covered with strange growths, barnacle-like shells pulsing with dim light. The creature was breathing weakly, smoke rising from its nostrils with every shallow breath. The girl stumbled and fell at Elias's feet, her voice trembling. "Please, help her! My mother is dying," she said, her words broken but clear enough to understand. Elias dropped his wrench and ran to them, kneeling beside the dragon. The heat radiating from the creature was intense. Like standing near an open reactor, he looked at the barnacle-like growths closer, and his mechanical eye adjusted its focus automatically. Tiny signals flickered inside each one, pulses of energy. "Microtransmissions," he frowned, confused. "What kind of infection is this?" he muttered. The girl shook her head, tears glistening on her cheeks. "It's not infection. It's killing her from inside," she whispered. Elias led them inside his workshop, pulling a heavy tarp off a metal table reinforced with carbon beams. He activated the lift to raise the dragon gently, the old machine groaning under its weight. As the table adjusted, Elias began scanning her with an old military-grade analyzer. The results appeared instantly, and his heart skipped. The barnacles were not organic. They were mechanical. Tiny living machines fused with flesh, each one sending a coded signal toward deep space. He muttered to himself, "This isn't infection. This is transmission." The girl, exhausted, sat on the floor. Hugging her knees, she said her name was Lyrian, from a distant colony beyond Saturn. Her mother, she said, was once a guardian dragon, a protector of their world. But when the hive invaded, they turned her mother into this. Elias had heard of the hive before, machines with living minds, half biological, half metal. But he had never seen their work so close. He opened one of the barnacle shells carefully with a fine laser. Inside was a pulsing crystal surrounded by tiny filaments, like nerves. When the laser touched it, the entire workshop flickered. Lights dimming for a second, Elias pulled back immediately. The dragon's body twitched, her chest rising faster, her pulse spiking on the monitor. Lyrian jumped up, fear in her eyes. "What did you do?" she cried. Elias steadied her. "Nothing yet, but whatever this is, it's alive." He ran to the console and checked his sensors again. Each barnacle now emitted stronger waves, syncing together into a single rhythm. It was as if they were responding to his interference. He traced the signal pattern and saw something horrifying. It wasn't random noise. It was language, encrypted, complex, and ancient. Elias leaned back in disbelief, whispering, "They're talking to something." "Out there," the dragon groaned softly, her eyes flickering open for a second, silver light glowing inside them. She looked directly at Elias for a brief moment. He felt like someone or something was looking through her eyes, staring deep into his mind. Then her gaze faded, and her head fell still. Lyrian pressed her hand against her mother's scales, whispering softly in her own language. Elias didn't understand the words, but the emotion in her voice was clear: fear, love, and desperation. He placed a blanket around her shoulders and said quietly, "I'll do what I can." Hours passed as Elias worked. Wires scattered across the floor, sparks flying. He tried every trick he knew. Cooling systems, nan-eat flush, power stabilizers, but nothing worked. The dragon's condition worsened, the barnacles spreading faster across her wings. It looked less like sickness and more like transformation. Elias stopped, staring at the creature. Something deep in his memory stirred. Old files. Old stories from the war. Creatures turned into beacons. Weapons that could awaken hive fleets. He turned to Lyrian and asked carefully, "When did this start?" 3 days ago, she said weakly. After she flew through a storm near the Black Moons, Elias's heart sank. He knew what that meant. That storm wasn't natural. It was a hive transmission zone. He realized something terrible. The dragon wasn't dying. She was becoming a transmitter. He stepped back, fear mixing with awe. If she fully activated, the hive could find them anywhere. He turned to the girl and whispered, "Lyrian, if I don't stop this, your mother won't just die." She looked up, trembling. "Then what will happen?" Elias took a deep breath, his voice low and grim. "She'll call the hive right to us." Outside, thunder rolled across the horizon. The wind grew colder, carrying static in the air. Elias looked at the sky through the cracked roof, and for the first time in years, he felt something he thought he'd buried forever. "Fear," he whispered to himself, staring at the dragon. "This isn't disease," he said slowly. "It's communication." The night on Titan felt endless, the wind howling against the metal walls of the scrapyard. Elias worked without rest, his tools scattered across the floor. His hands trembling from fatigue. The young alien girl, Lyrian, sat beside her mother's glowing body, whispering words in a language that sounded like song and sorrow mixed together. The albino dragon's chest rose weakly, light pulsing beneath her white scales. The barnacle-like growths now covered half her body, their blue glow beating in a steady rhythm. Elias leaned closer, the readings on his scanner growing stranger by the minute. Each pulse wasn't random. It was perfectly timed. He zoomed in on one signal, and his mechanical eye displayed a pattern, an organized code. "Binary translation matrix, sequence repeat," he muttered, running a quick algorithm through his console. And then his screen filled with lines of text, ancient alien script flashing like whispers from the deep void. Elias's heart skipped. "This isn't infection," he said under his breath. "It's communication." He stared at the dragon's glowing chest, realizing each pulse was a message being transmitted into space. Lyrian stood slowly, her voice shaking. "Can you stop it?" she asked. Elias looked at her, sweat running down his temple. "I can try," he said. "But if I block it wrong, I might kill her." Lyrian took a deep breath, her silver eyes glimmering with faint tears. "Then please be careful," she whispered. "She's all I have left." Elias turned back to his console. Connecting a jammer through an old relay he built years ago during the Hive War, he began mapping the frequency, tracing each pulse to its source. What he found chilled him. The signal wasn't just going out, it was coming back. Something, or someone, was replying. His computer beeped as a return signal came through. Faint but clear, a voice, mechanical yet eerily alive, spoke through the static. "Designation found. Guardian code detected. Awakening sequence initiated." Elias froze. The dragon's body convulsed, her eyes flickering open again, this time glowing pure white. Lyrian cried out, "Mother!" and rushed to her side. The barnacles across the dragon's wings began to move, opening like tiny metallic flowers, releasing a soft hum that filled the room. Elias quickly activated the jammer. A deep vibration shook the workshop as sparks flew from the ceiling. The signal spiked and then suddenly went silent. For a few moments, everything was still except for the faint breathing of the dragon. Elias sighed in relief, wiping his forehead. "I think it worked," he said. But before he could finish the sentence, the lights flickered again and the entire room went cold. On the scanner, a new signal appeared. Darker and more complex than before, it wasn't a call, it was a lock-on. Something had found their location. He looked at Lyrian, his face pale. "We've been traced," he said quietly. Lyrian stepped back, fear filling her voice. "What do you mean?" The hive, Elias said. They know she's here. Outside, the air began to tremble. Faint ripples moving across the horizon. Elias grabbed his old rifle, the kind that used plasma coils instead of bullets. Get down to the hangar, he ordered. Lyrian hesitated. But my mother... She stays, he said firmly. If we move her now, she'll die faster. The ground shook as a bright blue light appeared in the sky. Growing larger every second, a hive drone ship, small but deadly, broke through Titan's clouds, its engines screeching like metal claws. It hovered over the scrapyard. Scanning with red beams that sliced through the fog, Elias pulled a lever, and the hangar doors below opened automatically. Go! He shouted, pushing Lyrian toward the underground passage. She looked at him one last time, her eyes full of fear and trust. Please don't let her die, she whispered, and disappeared into the tunnel. Elias turned back toward the dragon. Her breathing now shallow, her glow fading. He could hear the hive drones landing outside, their metallic limbs clicking as they spread through the yard. He checked his monitors. The jammer was still active, but weakening, the hive signal kept trying to break through. Wave after wave, he didn't have much time. He kneeled beside the dragon, his voice low. I don't know if you can hear me, he said, but I need you to fight this thing, whatever it is. The dragon's eyes flickered again, faint light glowing deep inside. Then, a whisper, soft and broken, escaped her lips. Eli? As... Elias froze, his blood running cold. No one had called him that in years. That was his old nickname, used only by his fallen crew from the Hive War. He stared at her, disbelief mixing with fear. How do you know that name? The dragon didn't respond, her head falling weakly to the side. Elias's mind raced. Was she speaking to him, or was something speaking through her? He checked the scanner again. A new energy signature had appeared, one that matched the ID codes from his old squadron's communication database. It was impossible. Those codes were decommissioned 10 years ago. He whispered to himself, this can't be happening. Outside, the drone's spotlight swept across the yard. Stopping on the workshop, a robotic voice echoed through the comms. Human presence detected, surrender or be eliminated. Elias slammed a switch. Locking the doors, he powered up his defensive turret, but he knew it wouldn't hold for long. He had one last chance, to cut the hive signal completely before they broke through. He connected the jammer directly to the dragon's heart node. Overriding the safeties, sparks flew, and the floor shook violently. The dragon roared weakly, her body arching upward. Wings spreading wide even in her pain, the barnacles began to shatter. Blue liquid dripping to the ground. For a brief moment, Elias saw something inside them, tiny mechanical creatures, dying as the signal broke. Then silence, total silence, the lights went out, and only the faint glow of the dragon's eyes remained. Elias fell to his knees, gasping for breath. He looked up at her, voice trembling. What are you? He whispered. The dragon turned her head slightly, her glowing eyes fixed on him, and in a voice that was not hers alone, it spoke softly. We are not dying. We are remembering. Elias stared, speechless. The sound of the hive drones outside faded into the distance, as if retreating. But deep down, he knew this was not victory, it was only the beginning. The morning sky over Titan was not blue. It was dark, heavy, and restless. Clouds of methane drifted low over the scrapyard, glowing faintly with electric light, and above them something huge moved. A shadow that swallowed the sunlight. Elias Vorn stood in the middle of his workshop, his body aching, his hands trembling. The albino dragon lay silent behind him, her breathing shallow but steady. The girl, Lyrian, had returned from the underground tunnel, her face pale, eyes wide with worry. She looked up through the cracked ceiling and whispered, They've come. Elias followed her gaze, high above. Metallic forms cut through the clouds. Hive drones, sleek and sharp, moving with perfect precision. Their wings unfolded like knives, shimmering with strange symbols that pulsed with blue light. Hundreds of them spread out across the horizon, scanning the colony. Elias grabbed his old communicator and switched to a private military channel. "Command, this is Elias Vorn, Titan Sector." "Scrapyard District," he said, his voice low and firm. Static filled the line. Then a cold response came through. "No active command detected." "This channel is discontinued," Elias cursed under his breath. He was alone, completely cut off. The ground shook as one of the smaller hive ships landed near the scrapyard. Its landing gear pierced the frozen soil, sending ripples of dust into the air. Mechanical limbs unfolded from its hull, scanning the area with red beams of light. The drones began to spread around it, moving toward the workshop. Lyrian stepped closer to her mother's body, her small hands glowing faintly as she whispered an alien prayer. Elias loaded his plasma rifle, the old weapon clicking and sparking with age. He turned toward her and said, "Whatever happens, you stay behind me." "Understood." She nodded silently, tears already gathering in her eyes. Outside, the hive drones spoke in unison, their voices metallic and calm. "Identify life form. Surrender target for assimilation. Resistance will result in termination." Elias didn't answer. Instead, he activated a magnetic barrier around the workshop, a blue energy field that shimmered like liquid light. It wouldn't hold forever, but it would buy time. The drones opened fire, plasma rounds slamming into the shield. The air shook with every impact, sparks flying. The light dimming with each strike, Elias gritted his teeth and ran to the console. Trying to reinforce the field, the power readings were dropping fast. He had maybe 3 minutes before the barrier collapsed. Lyrian looked at her mother, her voice breaking. "She's calling them, isn't she?" Elias paused, glancing at the monitors. The dragon's heart monitor still pulsed, the signal faint but steady. "She's not calling them," he said softly. "She's controlling them." Lyrian blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Elias pointed to the scanner. "The hive isn't attacking us yet. They're surrounding us. Waiting." He leaned closer to the monitor, his eyes narrowing. "They're waiting for her." The dragon's eyes flickered open, glowing faintly with white fire. For the first time, she lifted her head slightly, her voice soft but clear. "Elias Vorn," she whispered. "You are late." Elias froze. He felt a chill run through his chest. Her voice carried not just sound, but memory. Something old, something human. "How do you know my name?" he asked, his voice trembling. The dragon blinked slowly. "You built me," she said. Elias stumbled back, shaking his head. "No, that's not possible," he muttered. "I worked on drone systems, not—" But then it hit him years ago. During the Hive War, he had worked on Project Aegis, a secret alliance between humans and alien engineers. They created living guardians, biomechanical dragons designed to protect colonies from the hive. But the project was destroyed, or so he thought. The dragon's eyes glowed brighter, her words slow and heavy. "They turned us into weapons, Elias. They took our minds and gave us the hive's voice." Elias felt his knees weaken. He looked at Lyrian, who was staring in shock. "Your mother," he whispered. "She was one of the Aegis Guardians." Outside, the drones stopped firing. The air became eerily still. One massive hive ship descended, its hull covered in moving symbols. Alive and shifting, the ground trembled as it landed, towering over the scrapyard like a god made of metal. A bright beam of blue light shot from its core, striking the ground near the workshop. From it emerged a tall figure, half mechanical, half living, its face hidden by a mask of silver plates. It spoke in a calm, deep voice. "Guardian Aegis 1, return to the network." "Your purpose is complete!" Lyrian screamed. "She's not yours!" The figure turned its head toward her, its red eyes glowing. "She belongs to the hive," it said coldly. "As do all who were made in its image." Elias raised his rifle, aiming directly at the figure. "Not today," he growled and pulled the trigger. The plasma shot hit the figure's chest, exploding in a flash of blue light. But when the smoke cleared, the figure was unharmed. It looked at him almost amused. "Primitive weapon," it said. "I expected more from the one who built the Aegis." Elias's breath caught. "You know who I am?" The figure nodded slowly. "The hive remembers all creators. Behind them," the dragon struggled to move, her body glowing brighter. She raised her head and roared, the sound shaking the entire scrapyard. The drones stopped moving, their red lights flickering uncertainly. The hive figure turned, its voice sharp. "Cease connection!" But it was too late. The dragon's roar became a pulse of pure energy, sweeping across the ground. Every drone it touched froze mid-air, their eyes dimming. The massive hive ship trembled as systems overloaded, blue lightning crawling across its surface. Elias covered his face as the light filled the sky. Then silence. Only the wind remained. When the light faded, the hive ship was gone, its massive form dissolving into thin mist. The scrapyard lay still, smoke rising from broken metal. Elias turned to the dragon, his voice soft. "What did you do?" The dragon's eyes dimmed slowly. "I bought us time," she said weakly. And then her head fell, her breathing fading once more. Lyrian ran to her mother. Clutching her hand, sobbing quietly, Elias stood in silence, the weight of what just happened pressing on him like gravity itself. He looked toward the horizon, where the hive fleet had vanished into the clouds. He knew they would return, stronger and angrier. He whispered to himself, "This war isn't over." The scrapyard was quiet again. But it was not peace. The ground still smoked from the battle, the smell of metal and burnt ozone filling the cold Titan air. Elias stood in silence, watching the albino dragon breathe faintly, her body glowing like dying starlight. Lyrian sat beside her mother, whispering softly in her alien tongue, her voice trembling with love and fear. Elias felt the tremor in his hands as he checked the scanners again. The hive ship was gone, but the signal was not. Something deeper still pulsed inside the dragon's body, quiet but steady like a hidden heartbeat. He stared at the readings, his mind racing. "This isn't over," he muttered. The girl looked up, her eyes tired but alert. "What do you mean?" Elias took a deep breath. "She stopped them, yes, but she also sent something out, a different kind of signal." Lyrian frowned. "Like a call?" Elias nodded slowly. Maybe not a call for war, but for memory. He turned to the dragon's still body, and his voice softened. "What are you trying to show us?" He connected his neural link to the scanner, a dangerous move he hadn't tried in years. A pulse of light spread across the room, and suddenly his mind was no longer in the scrapyard. He was standing in a vast hall of light, walls made of energy, and a single white dragon floating above him. "Wings spread wide like clouds, where am I?" he whispered. A voice answered, echoing from everywhere. "You are in memory." It was the dragon's voice, but stronger, clearer, almost human. Elias turned and saw her, alive, radiant, whole. Her scales shimmered like crystal, her eyes glowing with warmth. "You built the first of us," she said, her voice calm. "You gave us purpose. And they turned it into war." Elias looked around, seeing flashes of the past, humans and dragons working side by side, engineers creating living guardians to defend colonies from chaos. He saw the early days of the Aegis project, his younger self smiling, proud. Then the scenes changed. He saw fire, explosions, betrayal, the hive invasion tearing through the stars, machines merging with flesh, the Aegis guardians falling one by one. "I thought you all died," Elias said quietly. The dragon lowered her head. "Most of us did," she replied. "But some were taken, rebuilt, and enslaved by the hive." Her eyes dimmed, sadness filling them. "They erased our names, our hearts, and turned us into their voice." Elias clenched his fists, his voice filled with guilt. "I didn't know. I never wanted this." The dragon looked at him kindly. "You couldn't have known," she said. "But now you can end it." The hall of light shifted again, and Elias saw new images. Massive hive fleets moving toward the outer systems, a dark network pulsing across the stars. Controlled by one core intelligence, the dragon's voice echoed. "The hive is not alive, Elias, it remembers. It consumes memory and becomes it. Every signal they send is a thought. Every war is a dream of the old ones." He saw the image of the hive queen, a colossal being of wires and bone, her eyes glowing red like dying suns. At her feet were thousands of broken dragons, each whispering fragments of songs. Elias felt cold sweat on his neck. "Why show me this?" he asked. "Because," the dragon said softly, You are the only one who can stop the hive from waking her again. The light around them began to fade. The hall trembling, Elias felt pain surge through his skull, his link overloading. The dragon's voice echoed one last time. Remember what we were before they took us? Remember the code that set us free? And then everything vanished. Elias gasped and ripped the neural cable from his head. Falling back to the floor, Lyrian rushed to his side, holding his arm. "What happened?" she asked, panicked. He blinked, his vision still spinning. "I saw her memories," he said, his voice rough. "Your mother was one of the Aegis Guardians." Lyrian looked at him, her eyes wide with both wonder and pain. "She was a protector, not a weapon," she whispered. Elias nodded. "Yes, but the hive changed her, used her body as a beacon." He looked at the monitors again, seeing new readings appear. A strange signal was building deep inside the dragon's chest. It wasn't hive code, it was human, mixed with alien script, a language that only the Aegis Project had used. "She's trying to talk to us," Elias said. He connected the speakers, and the dragon's faint voice filled the room. "Elias, the code. Inside the heart. Unlock it before they return." Elias ran to the control panel and opened the dragon's chest cavity using magnetic clamps. Blue light spilled out, warm and pulsating like liquid energy. Inside was a core, glowing with white fire, covered in strange runes and metal veins. He could see data flowing through it, millions of symbols, each one a piece of her memory. He inserted his data drive, linking it to the core. The system resisted at first, then opened, revealing hidden files marked with the Aegis insignia. He whispered in disbelief. "She stored the entire Aegis memory in her body." Lyrian looked at him. "What does that mean?" Elias smiled faintly. "It means your mother wasn't just a dragon. She was the archive of everything the hive tried to erase." The dragon's voice returned, weak but clear. "You must take the memory to the stars beyond," she said slowly. "If they find it here, all will burn." Elias looked at Lyrian, his expression grim. "They're coming back," he said. Outside, thunder rolled again, and lights flickered across the sky. Hive ships descending once more, larger this time. He grabbed his plasma rifle and the memory drive. Slipping it into his pocket, he turned to the girl. "Stay close to me." "No matter what happens," Lyrian nodded, clutching her mother's hand one last time. The dragon looked at both of them, her eyes glowing faintly. "Go," she whispered. "And remember who we were?" Elias and Lyrian ran toward the hangar as the hive fleet broke through the clouds. Above them, the sky burned blue, and in the last moment before the blast wave hit, Elias looked back. The albino dragon raised her head and released one final roar, a sound that echoed across the stars like the memory of a forgotten world. The wind screamed across Titan's wasteland, carrying dust and ash through the air. Elias and Lyrian ran through the maze of broken ships, sparks and smoke rising all around them. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the hive fleet descended from the clouds, their engines roaring like thunder. The sky glowed with blue light, and the metallic hum of 1,000 drones filled the silence of the dead world. Behind them, the scrapyard was burning, flames dancing against the silver fog. The albino dragon still lay within the workshop, her eyes closed, her body glowing faintly beneath the wreckage. Elias looked back once, guilt flickering in his eyes. He wanted to go back, but there was no time. Lyrian stumbled beside him, clutching a small crystal device, the last piece of her mother's memory. "She said the hive will burn the planet," Lyrian whispered. Her voice shaking, Elias nodded, breathing heavily. "Not if we reach the ship in time," he said. "We can still escape." They reached the hangar, an old human freighter buried under layers of ice and dust. Elias slammed his hand on the control panel, and the door hissed open with a groan. Inside, the lights flickered weakly, dust falling from the ceiling. The ship had been grounded for years, but it was their only chance. He ran to the cockpit, his fingers flying across the controls. Power cells hummed, the engines coughed to life. Sputtering with orange flame, Lyrian stood near the window, watching the horizon as massive hive warships broke through the atmosphere. Their shapes were monstrous, like insects carved from living metal. Their bodies crawling with smaller drones, Elias activated the ship's systems, muttering to himself, come on, just one more flight." The ship's lights brightened, and the engines roared with new energy. But before they could lift off, the ground cracked open behind them. From the fissure rose a massive drone, its single red eye glowing like fire. Lyrian gasped. "It's the Sentinel," she whispered. "They sent a Guardian unit." The creature was enormous. Taller than the hangar, its arms made of rotating blades, its chest pulsing with blue energy. It moved toward them with slow, deliberate steps, shaking the ground with every movement. Elias cursed under his breath and grabbed his plasma rifle. "Get inside the ship and stay there," he shouted. Lyrian hesitated, tears welling up. "But you can't fight that." He gave her a small, tired smile. "I don't need to win. I just need to buy us time." She ran into the ship. Sealing the door behind her, Elias stood outside, facing the massive hive sentinel. His rifle glowing faintly, he took a deep breath. The wind tearing through his hair, he remembered the wars, the lives lost, and the promise he made long ago to protect, not destroy. But now protection meant standing his ground. The sentinel's chest opened, revealing a glowing blue orb. A voice echoed from within, cold and mechanical. "Human mechanic, surrender the Aegis memory core." Elias raised his weapon. "You'll have to take it from me." The sentinel's wings unfolded, sending out a shockwave that blew debris into the air. Elias fired, plasma bolts cutting through the smoke. Hitting the creature's armor, each impact left a glowing scar. But it wasn't enough. The sentinel swung its arm, and a blade of energy tore through the ground. Knocking Elias backward, he hit the dirt hard, his ribs aching. But he got up again, his weapon sparking. He aimed for the creature's chest and fired the last power cell. The shot pierced the blue orb, cracking it open, releasing a burst of blinding light. The sentinel staggered, roaring in static pain. Elias turned and ran toward the ship, yelling, "Now, Lyrian! Take off!" The ship's engines roared, lifting from the ground, dust swirling beneath it. Lyrian saw Elias running and reached out through the window. "Elias! Hurry!" He sprinted across the burning ground, his legs heavy, the heat rising like fire from below. But before he could reach the ramp, the sentinel's broken arm fired one last blast of energy. The shockwave hit him square in the chest. Throwing him to the ground, Lyrian screamed, her heart pounding as the ship's sensors warned of another attack. Elias struggled to move, coughing, blood on his lips. He looked up at the ship and saw Lyrian's terrified face. He smiled faintly. Go now," he whispered. Lyrian shook her head, tears falling. "I can't leave you." Elias shouted with the last of his strength. "You have to." She gave her life for that memory. "Don't let it die here." Lyrian hesitated, trembling. Then she closed her eyes and pushed the throttle forward. The ship rose higher, breaking through the smoky sky. Flames trailing behind it, Elias watched it climb, pride and sorrow in his eyes. The sentinel behind him began to rise again, its systems repairing. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small detonator connected to the workshop's power core. He smiled bitterly. "You wanted the core?" he muttered. "Well, here it is." He pressed the button. A deep rumble shook the ground, light bursting from the scrapyard in a wave of blue fire. The explosion consumed the sentinel, the workshop, and everything within miles. The hive fleet above trembled as the energy pulse spread outward, disrupting their systems in orbit. Lyrian watched from the cockpit, her hands shaking, her eyes wide as the light filled the sky. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She whispered softly, "Thank you." Elias, for a long moment there was silence. Then the ship's console beeped, a faint signal flashing across the screen. It was Elias's voice, faint but calm. "Lyrian, if you're hearing this, then you made it out. Keep the memory safe." "Don't stop!" "The hive will come again, but so will hope." The message ended, and the stars outside glimmered softly through the haze. Lyrian looked at the crystal device in her hand, glowing faintly, her mother's memory. Elias's courage, all of it now in her care. She wiped her tears and whispered, "I'll finish what you started." And as her ship disappeared into the dark sky, the last pulse from Titan faded. But deep beneath the ashes, Something stirred. The albino dragon's eyes flickered once more, faint light glowing beneath the dust. Her voice, soft as wind, whispered into the void. "Remember us."